بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيد المرسلين محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي. Honorable A'immah, Sheikh Dr. Abu Amina Bilal Phillips, and also Imam al-Masjid, Maulana Daud, and all the other Imma brothers and of the sisters upstairs. I greet you with the greetings of Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. I've been given the task of introducing our Honorable Sheikh, and I have to start off by mentioning why this is important. Our Imma, our scholars of Hadith, you find in many of their books they mention that you must look at who do you take your ilm from, who do you take your knowledge from. So we mention who is the Sheikh, so then you can judge, then you know the Sheikh's qualification. Abu Amina Bilal Phillips, the Honorable Sheikh, he was born in Jamaica, and then he grew up in Canada. He started off his life as a Christian, but he had this burning desire for the truth. So he converted to communism. But he didn't feel that satisfaction, that fulfillment. So Allah Ta'ala guided him to Islam. And the Sheikh have embraced Islam around about what I picked up the last time, at the age of about 25 years old, in the 1970s. But subhanallah, the first thing the Sheikh wanted was to have more information about Islam. What is Islam all about? You know, there's a beautiful saying that says in Arabic, فَاقِدُ الشَّيْء لَا يُعْطِي. What you don't have, you cannot give. If I don't have money, I cannot give charity. If I don't have ilm, I cannot convey ilm. What can I educate other people if I myself have nothing? So he took the Sheikh to Medina University, the city of our beloved Nabi Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And the Sheikh roundabout studied the same time as Dr. Abdul Hakim Quick, whom we all know, who stayed quite a few years in South Africa. In fact, they graduated together. In fact, that was the year when Sheikh Ibrahim and some of Sheikh Rafa, all of them just arrived in Medina. The Sheikh, Honorable Sheikh, didn't stop there. He went to Riyadh and he did his MA degree. And from Riyadh, the Sheikh went to go and study afterwards in the 90s at the University of Wales for a PhD degree. This is the Sheikh's life. And along the way, Jama'at Muslimin, the Sheikh have established so many institutions. The Sheikh was so much involved in Riyadh, in UAE, where the Sheikh remained about more than 10 years in Riyadh, in Al-Minara Institute, educating, involved with setting up syllabus. The Sheikh did a similar role when the Sheikh went to Dubai. Sheikh, subhanallah, Sheikh was involved with the Mufti of the Haram, so many people. The Sheikh is currently now in Qatar. The Sheikh has been on so many television channels from Saudi Arabia to the Deen television in America to UK. And if I look at the Sheikh, I find that the Sheikh actually accommodated at a particular period in time where there were not a lot of English-speaking people in the Arab world. The Sheikh, with the qudrat of Allah Ta'ala, have more than 50 publications behind him. 50 books the Sheikh have written. That's a lot, Jama'at Muslimin. A person who have embraced Islam. So many times we find many of us, Jama'at Muslimin, we have spent a lifetime. Allah granted us a lifetime, but we haven't achieved, we've got nothing to show. This is a person who spent his life, subhanallah, for the deen of Allah Ta'ala. And the Shaykh have mentioned, it took him 21 years of talking to his parents for his parents to embrace Islam. And subhanallah, Jama'ah, the Sheikh after that, the Sheikh is currently involved with the online university where the Sheikh have more than 400,000 students. That is an achievement, more than 400,000 students. Subhanallah, tuition free. You know, meaning there's no fees attached, just registration. Because that is the Sheikh's aim in life, is to ensure that everyone, every person is educated about the deen. And subhanallah, Jama'atul Muslimin, maybe some of us think, yeah, maybe the Sheikh is not married, that's why the Sheikh can achieve. I have to tell the Jama'ah, the Sheikh has 4 wives and 21 children. So don't think that, yeah, you know, sometimes if somebody says, if you read somebody's profile, who's the person, might think, no, maybe the Sheikh is not married, maybe. No, the Sheikh have lots of responsibility. Lots of responsibility. But that did not cause the Sheikh to lose focus in life. And what I can tell the Jama'ah about the Sheikh, if I look at the Sheikh, I myself, when there used to be Darul Arqam, they used to have, I used to teach about 2-3 years, one of the Sheikh's books, in fact, there was the main book we used, the Sheikh's book about the fundamentals of Tawheed. I used to teach that book. And one thing I can inform the Jama'ah about the Sheikh is his system is very simple. It's very simple. The Quran, the Sunnah, how it was interpreted by the best generation of Muslims and subsequently the generation just after that, how it was interpreted by them and how it was implemented by them. If they are the best, then who should be, if they are the role models for all of us, isn't their path the best? Jama'atul Muslimin, without any delay, after I've informed you who the Honorable Sheikh is, I now am to, inshallah, ask the Honorable Sheikh to come forward, Dr. Abu Amina Bilal Phillips, inshallah. فليتفضل مشكورا.
الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على رسوله الكريم وعلى آله وأصحابه ومن استنى بسنته إلى يوم الدين. All praise is due to Allah, and may Allah's peace and blessings be on the last Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam, and on all those who follow the path of righteousness until the last day. The topic for this evening is cultural Islam. Cultural Islam meaning Islamic culture and the culture of Islamic people. All of that can be summed up under the general heading of cultural Islam. Now, if cultural Islam means the culture which comes from the implementation of Islam, then that's what we should follow. Meaning, when you practice the 5 pillars of Islam, the 6 pillars of Iman, and all of the various instructions which Prophet Muhammad ﷺ has given us, while practicing that, it will produce a culture. That culture is desirable. It is the culture we should strive for. That whatever we're doing would be connected somehow to the authentic teachings of Islam. And let me just give you a definition of culture, just in case we use this term and oftentimes people are not really sure what it actually means. It's defined as the ideas, customs, and social behavior of a particular people or society. So we are clear. Culture is the ideas, what people hold, what people believe in, their customs, the traditions that they're doing on a daily basis, and their social behavior, how they interact with the people of the society. That is the culture. And that culture should reflect Islam. The basis of it should be Islam. However, what we find in much of the Muslim world today is that the culture does not, in fact, reflect the Islamic teachings. It's coming from other sources, not from the actual practice of Islamic teachings, but from inherited practices, what people did before Islam. When they became Muslims, they carried it along with them. Or from learned practices, being in contact with other societies, we may adopt some of the practices of these other societies. Or our practices could be a result of changes that have been made in the teachings of Islam. There were people with bad intentions and some with good intentions who did things which people started to follow. Some of it is satanic, we say. When we look at it, we say, this must have come from Satan. This couldn't come from a good source. Some of it is inadvertent interpretation of what people are doing. So we have a variety of different sources from which that culture can arise. However, from a Western perspective, Islamic culture, the true Islamic culture, represents a challenge to Western civilization. True Islamic culture. Fake Islamic culture, no, it's not a threat. There was an individual, very famous Harvard professor by the name of Samuel P. Huntington. 2 decades ago, back in 1998, he wrote a book called The Clash of Civilizations. The Clash of Civilizations. And in it, he outlined his vision of what was going on. Remember, this was 1998. We have to keep in mind that the beliefs concerning the Muslim world and terrorism and violence, etc., were already being propagated and promoted on a larger and larger scale. So, for example, in the New York Times and the International Herald Tribune in 1993, right, 5 years before the writing of this book, they stated in an article, Muslim fundamentalism is fast becoming the chief threat to global peace and security, as well as the cause of national and local disturbance through terrorism. It is akin to the menace posed by Nazism and fascism in the 1930s, and then by communism in the 50s. So this was the mood of the West with regards to Islamic fundamentalism. And remember that Islamic fundamentalism meant people holding on to the fundamentals of Islam. What are the fundamentals of Islam? 5 pillars of Islam, 6 pillars of Iman. So you hold on to them firmly, you're a fundamentalist. But that is what Islam wants us to do. So Samuel P. Huntington, he said The underlying problem for the West is not Islamic fundamentalism. It is Islam. A different civilization whose people are convinced of the superiority of their culture and are obsessed with the inferiority of their power. Does anybody not believe that Islam is the greatest? We are all convinced. We believe Islam is superior, is the most superior system for the world. That comes with believing that Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam was a messenger of Allah. And that Allah, when he said, Kuntum khayra ummatin ukhrijat linnas, that you are the best of civilizations, of nations, taken out from humankind for the benefit of humankind, that it meant Islamic civilization was the best, the most superior. And of course we are frustrated because today Muslims have no power to implement the principles of that civilization. So we are powerless, and we are obsessed with this powerlessness that we face. And we constantly want to revive and bring back the glorious past. Then he went on to say, the problem for Islam is not the CIA, nor the U.S. Department of Defense, the U.S. military. It is the West. This is not a Muslim speaking now. He said, it is the West. A different civilization whose people are convinced of the universality of their culture. The universality of their culture. Globalization. Globalization of what? Of Western civilization's culture. And they believe that their superior, if declining power, imposes on them the obligation to impose that culture throughout the world. That's what they feel. Western civilization is the best. It is the pinnacle of the evolutionary process. Their belief in evolution, societies evolve, and the ultimate point is Western civilization today. It is the best. And everyone should be following it. And it's their duty to impose it on everyone. Survival of the fittest. They say we are the fittest. So, he said, these are the basic ingredients that fuel conflict between Islam and the West. That is a concise analysis of the world situation today. Western culture is promoted through the media, the newspapers, television, movies, books, magazines. That culture is dominating all of the various means by which we communicate, we learn, we teach. On the other hand, in the Muslim world today, the culture that we follow in most cases doesn't reflect the true teachings of Islam. Because of that distorted image, many non-Muslims don't understand what Islam is. So distortions in culture can be a means of preventing others from even finding out about Islam. Yes, on one hand, the Runnymede report, which was published in the UK back in the 90s, about Islamophobia, whether it was real or something made up by Muslims, they concluded that Islamophobia is real. And the main sources of Islamophobia are politicians and the media. This is not us speaking now. This is the government of the UK. The main sources are politicians and the media. Politicians, because they need a scapegoat. We're talking about, for the most part, Western politicians. They need a scapegoat. When things aren't going well, they need somebody to say it's their fault. Not ours, but it's them, these people. In the past, they used to point the finger at the communists. Now, we are an ideal scapegoat. Because the communists, you couldn't tell who was a communist and wasn't, just from the way he looked, he dressed, etc. You had to hear his ideas. Whereas Muslims, we have particular ways of dress and habits, etc., make us very easily identifiable. So we become the ideal scapegoats. It's the Muslims. The politicians, as politicians all over the world do, exploit the people, mismanage the resources of the country, and when things are going bad, it's the Muslims. That's common, normal. It's happening more and more as more and more problems come. And then the media. The media, they want to sell newspapers. They want viewers on TV. They want ads in their magazines. So, to sell those ads, you need to have wide circulation. People have to buy your magazine. What do they buy magazines for? Sensationalism. Sensationalism. So when a Muslim robs a bank, and we have Muslims robbing banks, they are defined in the newspapers, in the media, etc., as the Muslim robber. But when a Christian or a Hindu or Buddhist, others rob banks, they're just robbers. This is the norm. If a Muslim commits a murder, we have Muslim murderers, it's a Muslim murderer. All the time they want to put that label, Muslim, Muslim, Muslim. But if it's anybody else, it's just a murderer, just a bank robber, just a thief. So the media wants to sell papers, so we become their scapegoat. But then we have to consider the Muslim culture as it is, as it really is. It is not, in fact, reflecting Islam, and it leads to, as a consequence, misinterpretations of Islam. It provides fuel for these attacks. Our malpractices, I mean, some of the things are cooked up by them, by the politicians and by the media, But some of the things are our malpractices, our culture. So we find these practices become sources of misrepresentation of Islam. Blocking people from understanding the teachings of Islam. So, for example, some of it might be innocent, which we don't necessarily blame people for. Culture, giving a wrong impression. For example, when I first went to Medina to study, back in the 70s, with some South African brothers, myself and Abdullah Hakim Quick, who, by the way, was the one who gave me Shahada. Allahu Akbar. What we experienced when we were there, we had a cultural experience which scared us there in Medina. Our friends, we had developed some friendships with Arab friends. When they got to know us, became close friends, they would take a hold of our hands. They would hold our hands. People here do that too. You're close to so-and-so, you hold his hand. But we were coming from North America, where if a man holds your hand, it meant what? It had a whole different meaning altogether. You understand? So it was for us a shock. These brothers would reach and hold our hands, we'd be, ah. What is this? You know, we were very uncomfortable. We sat down and talked about what's going on here. Are all these people homosexuals? So, of course, we came to learn that no, this is not, this is just a different culture. A culture where people, you know, have a closeness. We don't have like a bubble that you have to have around yourself. People don't get too close, right? There's no such thing as too close. So it is something we had to learn. And there are some customs and in the cultures which, though not necessarily acceptable, they're not really harmful. For example, in India, Pakistan, it's common for people, for women, to wear a red wedding dress. Red, particular. If you don't get married in red, you didn't have a marriage. If you go to the Hindus, if you attend a Hindu wedding, they're also wearing red wedding dresses. That's where it came from. Does Islam say anything about wearing red wedding dresses? No. Nothing in Islam about that. Technically speaking, if you wore it, you didn't wear it, no problem. But culturally there, it became a necessity. It became a must. And its origins were from Hindu culture. But is there harm to the faith? No, not really. It's just made life a little difficult for people. They must conform. And the Prophet ﷺ had said what? Yassiru wala tu'assiru. Make things easy for people. Don't make it difficult. Don't restrict people where Allah has left things open. You can wear any color you want. Among the cultural practices, for example, today, which leads to misunderstandings, and one misunderstanding I found among many non-Muslims who came to know Muslims, visited them in their homes, etc., etc. One big misunderstanding they had was Muslims worship the Kaaba. Very common misunderstanding. Muslims worship the Kaaba. And we can say to them, yes, no, we don't really worship the Kaaba. Yes, we bow in that direction. But what do you mean, you bow in that direction? If you bow in the direction of idol, aren't you worshiping the idol? Yeah. And then when we went into your homes, we find your prayer mat, you got a Kaaba on it. Isn't it? That's a favorite prayer mat with a big Kaaba right there. You put your head right down on that Kaaba. Isn't it? And then in front of it you have a picture in a frame of the Kaaba. Hey, what did you expect them to conclude? You know, we have given in our practices misunderstandings to people. But we can say this is relatively harmless, we can clear it up for them and so and so. We can fix it. However, sometimes it can become even more damaging. For example, in the UK a few years back, officers, immigration officers were instructed to look out for Pakistani Brits, girls, being taken back to Pakistan by their parents. Why? They were told, if you see them crying, see the girl, she's going and she's crying, you know, and parents are taking her, call her out of the line, ask her, where are you going? Why are you going? If she tells you that she's going there back to Pakistan to get married, stop the parents. Because forced marriages had become a thing in the newspapers. People, young girls, and of course they would say British, young British girls are being forced to marry. And in Western civilization, the Western thought, the idea that somebody is forced to marry somebody else, unacceptable. Though they used to do it. They used to do it before, you know, in the 18th century, 17th century, 19th century even, they were still doing it. Forced marriages. But they stopped. And now the finger is being pointed at Muslims. Forcing girls to marry people they don't want. They're being taken back to the village back in Pakistan where the grandfather came from, and they have to go marry somebody there who hasn't gone past grade 6, unqualified, incapable, but he is a family member. He is nephew. And by bringing him over to England, then he can then bring the rest of his family. So this is like a duty. Huh? Father, it's a duty. You get your daughter married to your nephew by your brother or your sister. That's part of strategy of getting over to Britain or elsewhere. This is unfair. It is unfair. But it doesn't take them out of the deen. You know, it's not life-threatening. It's just not good. And it gives a bad impression that Muslims force their daughters to marry people they don't want to marry. But then it can get worse. In some Muslim countries, Egypt, Sudan, Somalia, Kenya, that strip, there is a common practice. It also goes across West Africa too, but mainly in those countries, common practice of what they call FGM, female genital mutilation. Female genital mutilation, where they cut out body parts of the woman, sew her up, so she cannot have sexual relations. Impossible. Until The night of her marriage, they have to take her to the hospital. They have a doctor cut her open so she can have relations with her husband. Ooh, it's not very nice. Many women in that process bleed to death. All kinds of diseases they catch, infections and all kinds of stuff. Nasty. This is now harmful. But it's a culture. A culture which people stand very strong by. You try to ban that, you've got people ready to fight you, kill you. That is our way, that's our culture. But it's dangerous. It's taking lives. In Jordan, Turkey, Iraq, they have a practice where if a young girl contacts a male or is in contact with a male, not married, boyfriend, and the family finds out, what do? The father, the brother, the uncle will kill her, take her life. Why? To protect the honor of the family. So it's called honor killing. It's culture. Standard. So much so that even the courts, they don't punish them. They will give them some jail time, but they won't execute them for murder. That's what they did, is murder, but they don't call it murder, they call it honor killing. Honor killing. What does that say about Islam? This is culture. And this is amongst the evils of culture. That there comes a point where we have to stand our ground and say, no, we have to stop this. This has nothing to do with Islam. This is a crime. This is the crime of murder. And the punishment in Islam for murder is death. But the courts there in those countries, they say, well, you know, it was about protecting the honor of the family. And the honor of the family is uppermost. You must protect the family's honor. So we understand what motivated them. And of course, the father, the uncle, the brother, they will decide amongst themselves who's going to take the fall. Right? Say, okay, you're the youngest, your job. You take it, you take responsibility. Yeah, we helped you, but you do the 5 years or 3 years. Say, okay, fine. For the sake of the family, he's ready to do it. This is now evil. This is from Shaitan. This is serious. Furthermore, you have in southern Egypt, the area called Sa'id in Egypt, southern Egypt, bordering with Sudan, overlapping into Sudan. They have a practice, it's called widow remarriage or non-remarriage. Their belief is that a woman, if she becomes a widow, her husband dies, she is not to remarry. She's not allowed to remarry. Where did this come from? They have the remnants of a cult from the time of the pharaohs. In the mythology, in Egyptian mythology, the cult of Isis. Isis, female god, she's married, her brother desires her, she refuses to go with him, so he kills her husband. This is all mythology. after killing the husband, she still refused. Her son, Horus, she hides him until he grows up. When he grows up, he comes back and he kills the brother. That's the story. But the essence of the story is that ISIS did not remarry. So it became a part of the culture of the people of that area where the cult of ISIS began thousands of years ago. This is BC. Thousands of years ago. That practice became a norm in southern Egypt. Islam came, they accepted Islam, and it went on down into Sudan. But the people carried that practice with them. Widows do not remarry. So, a few years back, I saw an article in the newspaper. I saved it. If you don't believe me, you can contact me and I'll send you a copy of the article, where it mentioned in Qina, southern Egypt, a father, a brother, and an uncle took a woman, their daughter, sister, niece, took her to the cemetery and chopped her into pieces. Just chopped her up, like the butcher chops up meat into pieces. She was like 36 years old. Her husband had died, and she remarried. Secretly, she remarried, because you couldn't do it openly. She did it secretly. They found out, chopped her into pieces. This is culture. Muslim people's culture. Can we call it Islamic culture? No. Islam is free, innocent from such practices. And a final example is in India, Pakistan, where the dowry is reversed. In Islamic teachings, the man who wants to get married, he gives a dowry to the woman. Right?
No.
What happens in India and Pakistan is the opposite. The family of the girl, they have to give the dowry to the man. That's their practice. This is Hindu practice. It's a Hindu practice which they have inherited. So what happens? The father of the girl, the bride, he wants to get her married to the young man. So he promises him all kinds of stuff. BMW, nice flat, 60-inch TV, you know, all the different things to get her married. Then something happens. His business fails. He can't fulfill his promise. Now, the young man is putting pressure on the girl. Where is my stuff? My stuff isn't here. You promised your father, you know, make him bring. Of course, she can't make her father. He doesn't have the money. Can't afford it. So eventually, what does he do? He catches her in the kitchen, along with his mother, her mother-in-law. They pour kerosene over her and set her on fire. Burn her alive. More than 300 cases last year in Pakistan. In India, close to 1,000. In Bangladesh also, same thing happening. Bride burning. That's a culture. Muslim people practicing this culture. So what do we have to say about culture? We have to re-look at culture. We have to reconsider what we are calling our culture, to determine whether this culture is acceptable or not. Or can we just go on because that's what everybody else does, and our parents, our uncles, families have been doing it for years, generations, we just keep on going, we're justified? No. It can't be like that. We have to look at what these practices are and say, does it match the Quran and the Sunnah? Did the Prophet ﷺ encourage this? Or at least, does it not go against the Quran and Sunnah? Ideally, if it matches Quran and Sunnah, that's the best culture. But even if you're doing something which didn't go against the Quran and Sunnah, that would be still acceptable. But we have to be sure. Does it go against the Quran or the Sunnah? Because the Prophet ﷺ told us what? تَرَكْتُ فِيكُمْ أَمْرَيْنِ إِن تَمَسَّكْتُمْ بِهِمَا لَن تَضِلُّوا أَبَدًا. I've left with you two things. If you hold on firmly to them, you will never go astray. Kitabullah wa sunnati. The book of Allah and my sunnah. That's what he left for us. That is the criterion that we use to determine what of culture is acceptable and what is not. We can see where it can go from something very simple, red wedding dress, wearing your wedding ring on your left hand and this finger. People doing that here? Yes. It's not a big deal. But you know, when Princess Diana was getting married, right? And the Archbishop of Canterbury took the ring and had Charles put it on her finger. He put it by the thumb and said, in the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit, amen. That's what wearing the finger, the wedding ring on that finger means. That's affirmation of your belief in three gods in one. But you could say, I didn't know. I'm innocent. I didn't know that. I thought just, we do this to show I'm married. Right? But that's what's at the root of it. That's what's at the root of it. But when we consider these practices, we have to Islamically question all of them. If they involve some aspect of shirk, we really should clear it out. Yeah, it's innocent, but we really don't need that. The Prophet Muhammad ﷺ didn't wear a wedding ring. Abu Bakr never wore a wedding ring. Omar didn't, Uthman didn't, Ali didn't, they all didn't. And the Prophet ﷺ said, follow my sunnah and their sunnah. Sunnah of the Khulafa Rashidin al-Mahdiyin min ba'di. That's who we follow. Their example is the best example. So we need to get back to the real and true Islamic culture using this criterion to know what we should do and what we shouldn't do. We need to clean up our culture. If we are to move forward and not misrepresent Islam, we need to clean up our house from these practices which are not a part of Islam, and they go against the teachings of Islam. They may be harmful to our family members, etc. We have to take it on. It's not enough for us to say, that's what our people have been doing. That's the tradition. That is our custom. That is our culture. If we argue from that perspective, we are no different from the people in the time of Prophet Muhammad ﷺ. When he brought the message of Tawheed, the message of Islam to them, what did they say? What did they say? Allah said, وَإِذَا قِيلَ لَهُمْ تَعَالَوْا إِلَى مَا أَنزَلَ اللَّهُ وَإِلَى الرَّسُولِ قَالُوا حَسْبُنَا مَا وَجَدْنَا عَلَيْهِ آبَاءَنَا. If you, Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, call them to follow what Allah and His Messenger have revealed, they will say to you, what we found our foreparents doing is enough for us. Our culture is fine. We don't need what you're bringing now. That was their response, the response of the kuffar, the disbelievers, to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So we have to consider. I'm not saying if we cling on to our culture we become disbelievers, please. I don't want anybody going out and say, hey, this is what Bilal, he said that we are kuffar. Please. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that we're doing something similar to what they were doing. We are using the authority of the culture as justification for doing what is displeasing to Allah and His Messenger. That's what we're saying. So we need to be open-minded and willing to tackle, to analyze, to determine intelligently, not blindly, whether what we're doing is acceptable Islamically or not. That's just what makes sense. If we are to re-establish Islamic culture, Islamically acceptable culture, then we have to take that approach. And we have to consider all of the practices around which there are controversy. Some people say, no, this is really not from Islam, and so on, so on, so. Don't just say, I don't want to hear that. No, hear it. Hear what the evidence is. What's your proof? Not blindly, just turning our head away, because we may be turning our head away like those people who turned their head away from honor killing, bride killing, bride burning, all these other things, where Muslims' lives are devastated simply in defense of culture. One area which I'm going to close my presentation tonight with is an area very dear to all of us. And that area is the cultural practice of reading the Quran for barakah. Reading the Quran for barakah. What do I mean by that? And why I'm taking this topic? Because the Quran is the foundation of our faith. If we are misinterpreting the Quran and how we are supposed to be relating to the Quran, then what is that saying about our faith? We have become disconnected with the Quran. Disconnected. I know Cape Town is famous for its Qur'an. Globally, for those reciting the Quran, mashallah, and I've heard different recitations here and they're very beautiful. And beautiful recitation is recommended by Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He said, "Man lam yataghanna bil Quran falaysa minna." Whoever does not sing, beautify their voice in the reading of the Quran is not a true follower of mine. So, it has a foundation. However, what is the primary goal of reading the Quran? Huh? Somebody? Huh? To obey the laws. To be guided. To be guided. That is the fundamental reason for reading the Quran. For guidance. Allah said in the second chapter what? Hudan lil muttaqeen. Guidance for those who fear Allah. So the main purpose of reading the Quran should be guidance. However, in Muslim culture today, this important factor has been lost. I've seen it all over the Muslim world. Lost. One of my students when I was in Dubai, the Sheikh mentioned I was in Dubai teaching university there. I also set up a da'wah center and taught classes. Two of my students, when I looked at the list of students' names, I saw two of them had the name, one had the name Naml, and the other one had the name Nahl. Naml means what? Ant. You know the ant crawls on the ground? And Nahl means bee. The bees that make the honeycomb. And one was called Ant, and the other one Bee.
Must have been the laqab.
This was their name. No, this was their given names. Ant and Bee. So I asked them. I said, how did you get these names? Ant and Bee. They said, well, you know, our father, when we were born, what he did was he opened up the Quran and he just put his finger in it. You know, whatever his finger fell on, so you are now Ant. And you are Bee. Hudan lil muttaqeen. What happened to the guidance? The Quran misused. And it's a tradition there. Misuse of the Quran in this way. And there are many other ways in which it has become misused. One of those ways I want to advise you as your brother, elder, and younger. The belief, common belief here, and I saw it in India and Pakistan also, that the Hafiz can carry 7 or 10 members of the family to Jannah with him. Common practice, common idea, right? So families will designate one of the sons, you. You memorize the whole Quran. Don't worry, we'll take care of you. We'll live, you know, do our business, deal in riba, cheat, steal, anything, but we're depending on you. You understand? You're the one. Yeah? You're the one that's going to save us. Okay? Yeah. This idea, please, brothers, sisters, no. This hadith is not authentic. It's fake. It's not true. None of its narrations are authentic. The Hafiz will not carry your family members to paradise. Forget it. You will get to paradise based on your deeds and Allah's help. That's how you'll get there. Not on the Hafiz carrying you. That's reality. So if you live an evil life, then you will meet an evil end. That's the reality. So I just want to clear up that myth, that misunderstanding, which has turned into a cultural practice of designating one of your family members to carry you all to paradise. Please, save yourselves now. No, you have to do it yourself. He can't help you. And the other problem with regards to the Quran, we all know the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, خَيْرُكُمْ مَنْ تَعَلَّمَ الْقُرْآنَ وَعَلَّمَهُ. The best of you are those who learn the Quran and teach it to others. However, what the Muslim world has turned this into is something else. Another hadith. خَيْرُكُمْ مَنْ حَفِظَ الْقُرْآنَ وَحَفَظَهُ. The best of you are those who memorized the Quran and made others memorize it. There are two different things. The Sahaba said, we used to learn the Quran 10 verses at a time. And we didn't used to go on to another 10 until we understood the ahkam, the instructions in it. And we tried to practice it, then we went on to the next 10. That's how we learned the Quran. For practice. To implement with understanding. And they went on to say, the one who memorized Surah Al-Baqarah amongst us was called Hafiz. The one who memorized Surah Al-Baqarah amongst us was called Hafiz. Today, if you refer to somebody who just memorized Surah Al-Baqarah as Hafiz, they say, A'udhu Billah. You're insulting the Huffaz to call this individual Hafiz. But that's who the Sahaba called Hafiz. Why? Because Surah Al-Baqarah has virtually everything that's in the Quran. You can find it there in Surah Al-Baqarah. All the various stories and principles, etc., foundations, you find it there in Surah Al-Baqarah. And Surah Al-Baqarah is so powerful that the Prophet ﷺ had said, whoever recites Surah Al-Baqarah, their home is protected from shaitan for 3 days and nights. Allahu Akbar. That's Surah Al-Baqarah. He didn't say that about any other surah in the Quran. That's Surah Al-Baqarah. So, what we have to do as a community, we have to reassess our relationship with the Quran. To understand that the primary relationship is one of guidance that we should be seeking. Not to turn the Quran into a sing-song. In the beginning of our events, we have one of our Qurra recite from the Quran in Arabic, of course. That's Quran. But nobody who is listening, except for a few, understands what he recited. We may listen and we say, Allah, 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 Allah. But we have no idea what he recited. We might be saying Allah, 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 and Allah is saying, I curse the people who... Allah, Allah, Allah. You're bringing Allah's curse on yourself. You don't know what the verse is saying? Is this what it's supposed to be? Is this how the Quran is supposed to be read? We don't understand what it's saying. No guidance, only entertainment. Because that's what it's become. It's entertainment. He recites in a nice way, we like it. So it's like music. It's turned into music. We enjoy the music before we start our event. But this is not how the Quran was meant to be read. We have abused the Quran. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala warned about this time, the past and the present, saying, وَقَالَ الرَّسُولُ يَا رَبِّي إِنَّ قَوْمِ اتَّخَذُوا هَذَا الْقُرْآنَ مَهْجُورًا. O my Lord, the messenger said, O my Lord, indeed my people have boycotted this Quran. Indeed my people have boycotted this Quran. We are not taking guidance from it. We're using it for entertainment. And this is the foundation of our faith. I hope you can follow me to understand that we need to change this. We need to correct it. Because if we don't have that connection with the Quran, there's no future for us. There's no future for our community. We will just get weaker and weaker and weaker. So we have to turn this around. When the Quran is being taught, the meanings also have to be taught. The Quran should be used meaningfully. If we have a Quranic recitation at the beginning of a program, the translation in Afrikaans or English, whatever, should also be read. So everybody heard what Allah said. They understood what Allah said. This is the proper way to deal with the Quran. We need to revive that connection. So, in conclusion, and we have to keep in mind that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala also warned us that we need to reflect on the meanings of the Quran, saying, أَفَلَا يَتَدَبَّرُونَ الْقُرْآنَ أَمْ عَلَى قُلُوبٍ أَقْفَالُهَا. Will they not reflect, contemplate the meanings of the Quran, or are their hearts locked up? Is that not us today? Isn't our hearts locked up? The Quran is being read and we're not pondering it, we're not thinking about it, we're disconnected from it. So, my brothers and sisters, I hope Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will forgive our errors with regards to the Quran.
Ameen.
To correct our cultural practices which divorce us from the Quran. And to give us the courage to make a new step towards the Quran, to understanding it and benefiting from it. Because our future lies in understanding and practicing the contents of the Quran. Barakallahu feekum. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
وعليكم السلام ورحمة الله وبركاته. تقبل الله منا منكم صالح.
Inshallah, say shukran for ons Sheikh. As daar miskien 'n question of two en nog 'n broer is 'n guest kan wil geblaas en nog 'n uitpraat na 'n question. En seker die Sheikh is a deep thinker and is a deep writer, is goeie scholar. And is well versed. Is there any questions on the floor, inshallah?
Assalamu alaikum. I would like to ask you something on the ring that was mentioned. Assalamu alaikum. About the ring. Did Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, he didn't wear a ring, but I understand there is narrations that he did have a silver ring, and that ring was used for a stamp for letters in that time. Is that correct?
With regards to the ring of the Prophet ﷺ, he did wear a ring for some period of time. He did keep a ring with the stamp on it, but he wore it on which hand?
On the right hand.
Thank you. So it's perfectly okay. You want to follow the sunnah of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. You wore a ring on the right hand, but nobody will know that you're married because you wore it on the right hand. Further question?
Yes, quick question. Is there any verse in the Quran regarding the punishment in the grave?
If there were no verses in the Quran regarding the punishment of the grave, and I must say that the verses that scholars have pointed to as referring to the punishment of the grave could be interpreted in other ways. They are not definitive verses, meaning that the text is so clear, everybody understands that this refers to the punishment of the grave. But that is not the criterion for determining whether we believe in the punishment of the grave or not. Because Allah said, وَأَنزَلْنَا إِلَيْكَ الذِّكْرَ لِتُبَيِّنَ لِلنَّاسِ مَا نُزِّلَ إِلَيْهِمْ. I have revealed to you, O Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the reminder, the Quran, in order that you explain to the people what was revealed for them. So if the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam in authentic hadith described the punishment of the grave, you can find Sahih al-Bukhari, Sahih Muslim filled with these descriptions, then that is enough for us. We don't have to find a definitive verse, because somebody could say the same thing. Can we find anywhere in the Quran where it says that when you stand up to pray, you should say Al-Fatiha and a surah after? And when you bow, you should say Subhana Rabbi al-Azim. When you come up from ruku', you should say Sami Allahu liman hamida. When you make prostration, you should say Subhana Rabbi al-A'la. Can we find those verses? No. So then somebody can argue, well, why are you doing it? We're doing it because Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he described the prayer for us, and he said, Sallu kama ra'aytumuni usalli. Pray as you saw me pray. That's the deen. That's why he said, I left with you two things. He didn't just say the Quran. You see, that question, why am I saying this? Because that question is the opening question for the Quraniyun. Those who only accept the Quran and reject the Hadith. That is their style. I'm not saying, sister, if that was from a sister, that you are a Qurani, but that is their argument. That's the way they like to present their argument. Can you find in the Quran so and so and so? So we are now justified not to believe in the punishment of the grave. Like Hizb ut-Tahrir. Hizb ut-Tahrir, a movement which developed in the Middle East, Jordan, etc. Their founder, in his writings, denied the punishment of the grave. They said the hadith were not mutawatir and it's different stories. But he denies the punishment of the grave. So our basis is the Quran and the Sunnah. Further question?
Next question here. Please clarify the verse وَلَا تَقُولُوا لِمَنْ يُقْتَلُ فِي سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ أَمْوَاتٌ بَلْ أَحْيَاءٌ وَلَكِنْ لَا تَشْعُرُونَ.
Okay, the verse where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, don't say of those who die fi sabilillah, in the way of Allah, that they're dead. Do we all know where this is headed? Do we all know where this is headed? They are alive with Allah in the barzakh. Do we bury those who die fi sabilillah? Do we bury them or we keep them? Keep their bodies around? Since they're not dead, right? People are going with this verse that they're not dead. Don't say they're dead. They're still alive. So do we keep their bodies around? We bury them. A'udhu billah. Allah said they're not dead and you're burying them? See where this line of reasoning is going? This is confusion. This is confusion. They're not dead in the sense that what they have done will live on. The sacrifice that they made will live on. It will be remembered by those of their time, by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Its memory will not die. But they died. And that's why we bury them.
I've heard that for all non-religious matters, everything is allowed except if stated, example, pork, gambling, etc. But for religious matters, nothing is allowed except if stated, practiced, and the sunnah, etc. Please comment with proof.
This is a principle, this idea that for matters which are not primarily religious, what they call in Arabic mu'amalat, our daily dealings, interactions, trade, these matters, the general rule, according to the opinion of the majority of leading scholars of the past, the imams, 4 imams, etc., they held the opinion that the general rule related to them is that they are all halal. They're all permissible except those which were specifically prohibited. Whereas in religious matters, it is the opposite. That all religious acts are impermissible, haram, except those that were specifically permitted. This is a general rule, a rule for life. If it was that all of our social activities were to be considered forbidden except those made specifically permissible, life would be hell. Life would be hell. Because you would need to get a specific permission to wear this color, and to wear that color, and to wear this cap, and to wear socks, you couldn't turn around. To drive a car, and to eat from a restaurant, and to... Life would be hell. We would not survive it. That's why they say the basic rule, halal, everything, except that which is specifically mentioned, haram. And you notice in Allah, in the Quran, when He describes the forbidden things, حُرِّمَ عَلَيْكُمُ الْمَيْتَةُ وَالدَّمُ وَاللَّحْمُ الْخِنْزِيرُ, He lists all of the things forbidden. And then He said, وَمَا وَرَاءَ ذَلِكَ, whatever after that is permissible. Prophet Muhammad ﷺ added a few things, additional clarification, but That's the style, that is the way that the Quran comes. When Adam was in the garden with Eve, Allah told him, do not eat from that tree. All the other trees in the garden, halal. Specifically that tree, don't eat from. And that is how the halal and the haram is in our lives. All the juices you want to drink, halal. Fermented grape juice, haram. Unfermented grape juice, halal. We don't have to get permission for all of the other juices. No. Once it becomes alcoholic, haram. Other than that, all halal. And so on and so forth. Go ahead. Wa alaikum salam.
My question is with regards to pictures. Actually, because it's like contradicts to before I asked the question with regards to pictures. So in Cape Town, recently over a few years, there's been an uprising of what spiritual shuyukh coming. And with that is big following. But my question is that sometimes there's nothing different said to what our ulama say. For example, that sheikh would say, you must make salah. And everybody would say, Allahu Akbar, as if they haven't heard it before. So, what we have now is we have people obsessed, and we have, in the past you used to hear people have filters of their shit to their wallets or they carry it around. So now things has evolved. You have now WhatsApp and you have all the social media stuff. So now if I go to a friend and I see his profile and I see his sheikh, spiritual sheikh spaces there, is that type of thing allowed, or is it as simple as saying it's also as having a photo of your sheikh somewhere in your wallet?
Well, we have to say, is that ibadah? Is that keeping a photo of your sheikh? Is that ibadah? If it is a means of ibadah, then we'll say haram. If it's not a means of ibadah, technically we have to say halal. Unless you consider photographs in general haram. So once you have permitted photographs, you say photographs are halal, then it is the use of the photograph, how it is used, or what it captures. If it's capturing pornography, haram. If it's being used for worship, haram. But if it's used for remembrance, halal. For those who consider photographs to be halal. Inshallah. Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullah.
Would I be right if I say that I do not follow any madhab? I follow madhab, but that will fit me at that moment. And I won't specifically say I'm Shafi. I can just say I follow any that fits me at that moment.
Okay, brother's question, would I be right if I say I follow no specific madhab in general, but only the madhab which fits me at the moment? If I find it suitable, I'm following that madhab. When I move on to something else, if I don't find it suitable, let me go find another madhab that says it's suitable, you know. This is called fatwa shopping. Fatwa shopping. In other words, you're not seeking the truth. You're seeking permission to do whatever you want to do. That's not seeking knowledge anymore. That is just seeking an excuse to do whatever you want to do. So that approach is not acceptable. If we're seeking the truth and we look for the evidence and we see the various proofs and we are convinced of a particular position, to follow that permission is permissible. If that is because you are convinced of its correctness, not because you want to do something which the current madhab that you're in doesn't allow. Do you understand?
But by saying that, the situation which is right now in Cape Town regarding wudu, is a madhab that has less rules. Will I be wrong if I say, okay, because now we have water problem, I'll follow this madhab, which will be easier?
Okay. We have to understand that the madhabs were or are attributed to great scholars of the past who themselves did not follow those madhabs. What am I saying here? I'm saying that Abu Hanifa wasn't a Hanafi. Abu Hanifa wasn't a Hanafi. Imam al-Shafi'i wasn't a Shafi'i. Imam Malik wasn't a Maliki. Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal wasn't a Hanbali. What is that saying? That's saying that they were following something else. They all followed the same something else, the same madhab. What was the madhab they followed? The madhab of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The same madhab followed by Abu Bakr, Umar, Uthman and Ali. It's the same madhab. All of those great scholars, they tried to follow as closely as possible the madhab of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. That's the reality. The fact that in time their students changed some of their rulings, disagreed with some of their rulings, found more authentic rulings, etc., because they were human beings. They did make mistakes. So some changes took place, and eventually that body of jurisprudence, which the students and the students of the students and the students of the students followed, modifying, correcting, adding, deleting, eventually they were given names. Hanafiya, Shafi'iyya, Malikiyya, Hanbaliyya. These were names given. But they weren't specifically the madhab of the scholar himself. Maybe 50% were rulings he held, but 50% were not. He held other opinions. So that's the reality of the madhab. So what we are looking at, if we have an issue about water, one madhab says you should make wudu 3 times, washing yourself 3 times. Another madhab says you can make wudu washing 1 time. Now, what are we supposed to do? It's more convenient to do 1 time when we have a shortage of water. But are we just going to follow the one which says 1 time simply because we had a shortage of water? No, we have to say what was the evidence. So if we find one of the companions of the Prophet ﷺ narrated that the Prophet ﷺ made wudu washing each part 1 time, then that's okay. You can do it. So that's the reason why we will go with the 1 time, not simply because the madhab said it, but because the evidence of that madhab indicates that Rasulullah ﷺ did it. So we go with that. That's okay. That's perfectly okay. Alhamdulillah. Subhanakallahumma bihamdika. Ashhadu an la ilaha illa ant. nastaghfiruka wa natubu ilayk.
Sal ons sê baie shukran vir ons geluste Sheikh. May Allah Ta'ala give him durable batteries, jare, veel jare met alle geyr en baraka, inshallah. Ons sal ook maar vra vir die broers, is not his last visit. May Allah give him many more visits. Vir die donors en die sponsors, om te bring met sy 4 galates, inshallah, dat elke kan wees by elke corner van die Western Cape, inshallah. En ook vir die broers wat georganiseer het vir die masjid hierso. Sê shukran vir hulle ook en shukran vir die Jama'a se presence. En on behalf van die committee wil ons sê shukran ook vir Sheikh en vir al die mashayikh ook wat hier gewees het in die Jama'a, inshallah.